Well, Nate Schatzline, so great to have you on, and I'm excited to introduce the Christian Collins Show. It's been out for a while, but we're back on, and I'm excited to get this going with you. You're wreaking havoc there on the house floor. You're fighting for what's right. You're doing the hard work to get good things done. But I just wanted to jump into maybe your path of progression to getting to where you are currently and how you went about it. I know there's a lot of younger viewers. I'm connected, of course, with the Texas Youth Summit who want to know, how can I make a difference one day like Nate Schatzline? And would you talk about maybe your bio and how you got to the point where you ran for office? What inspired you to run, and what did it take to get to that leap of faith?
Oh, it's great. Christian, it's so good to be on with you. So grateful for your friendship, for Texas Youth Summit as well. Man, if you're watching today, you haven't bought your ticket for Texas Youth Summit, you need to buy it immediately. I'm not kidding. One of the best conferences I've ever seen for students who want to get civically engaged, fight for biblical values in government. But man, I'm honored to be on. I've been a pastor for the last 11 years, and really, politics wasn't on the horizon for me until 2020 hit. I had my degree was in poli-sci. I've always loved getting involved and making sure that, we had good people in office, all that kind of stuff. But running for office wasn't in the mix for me. As a pastor, we were overseeing a youth ministry. At the time, it was the largest youth ministry in California. And so, by the way, coming from California was the worst thing for my campaign trail as a conservative. So, but that said, we were literally in the city, and all of our ministry was built around being outside of the four walls of the church. So we were in the public school system where we were doing mentorship programs that were biblically based. And we were taking kids with behavioral issues, kids with drug problems, kids who had been raised in horrific scenarios, foster care, juvenile, kids in the juvenile justice system. I mean, you name it. We were working with them, breaking up fights. And we got to see over the course of about 5 years, about 5,000 kids give their heart to Jesus inside the city. And so we were loving what we were doing in ministry, just serving the Lord, really felt like we were running in our calling. And about that time, we have a youth night. There's 2,700 kids in the building. We are rocking and rolling, taking over a city, small groups, discipling kids. And about that time, COVID hits the next day. Wow. And when that happens, we're in California, so everything shuts down. I mean, everything, to the point, more than Texas, to the point where we had curfews. We couldn't go out of our homes past 7 p.m. I mean, this was like communist regime China all of a sudden. Wow. From, dictator Newsom coming down from the top. And we were like, this is nuts. This isn't the America that I dreamed of. This isn't the America that I have, lived in my entire life. And so our kids, we had 2 at the time, me and my wife, my amazing wife. By the way, I tell this to everyone. My dad told me growing up, doesn't matter how ugly you are, you find Jesus, he'll give you a beautiful wife. And all the ladies' reward is in heaven. So, but that said, I have my dream girl by my side. We're in California, and we're trying to help flip this state to be conservative. And in the battle of it, my oldest son's about to go into kindergarten, and they tell us he has to be vaccinated to get enrolled in school. Wow. And we were just like, heck no. There's no way. We'll burn the place to the ground before I stick an experimental needle in my 5-year-old's arm. There's no way. And so we packed everything up, left everything we knew, took a job pastoring in Fort Worth, Texas, which was home to us, came all the way back to put him in the school. And to my surprise, Christian, as I go to enroll him in the school district, I asked simple questions because I had worked in the public schools with at-risk kids. I understood the horrific California curriculum, and I thought, surely not Texas. Surely not are we experiencing this. And as I go to enroll him, I asked the administrator of this very highly rated public school in our area in Texas, will there be sex education for kindergartners? Surely not. And they said, oh, yes, we have comprehensive sex education for kindergartners here in the school. And I laughed out loud, and I go, okay, when you say comprehensive, what does that mean? And she goes, well, it's in the curriculum. I go, can I see the curriculum? This administrator said to me, I'm sorry, parents don't have access to the curriculum. And I go, well, then you're not showing my child. Yeah. And they said, well, there's not an opt-out option in the curriculum. And I go, and I laugh, and I go, can I speak to whoever your boss is that maybe is less incompetent than you are on this? Because there's no way we don't have rights as parents inside the state of Texas. Long story short, everything she said was the standard practice of the school district at the time. So we began to raise up warriors in Fort Worth to go out and flip school districts. We were partnered with incredible organizations like Patriot Mobile Action, who's just amazing. We partnered up with different groups all across Tarrant County specifically. And we have ended up over the last, I guess it's 3 years now, we have flipped 91 seats in Tarrant County alone to put godly people in office. Now, that entire school board is ran by Bible-believing Christians that literally took sexually explicit books out of their schools before the state mandated it. And so, all that said, long story short, I'm incredibly passionate about it. My state rep steps down. All I've been doing is being an activist pastor. And usually when you hear activist pastor, you hear like, for the left or like the woke mob. But it's like, no, we were showing up to school board meetings demanding that sexually explicit books be taken down. The same thing that you've done inside of the Woodlands and everywhere around there is we literally were showing up, and I was rallying parents, not knowing that the people that I was rallying would be the people that would jump on board with my campaign. And so all of a sudden, there was this opportunity where they were like, hey, someone is running, Matt Krause, your state rep is not running for office next session. You should run. And I was just like, I'm an activist. What do I know about running for office? Also, it would put me as the second youngest legislator out of all 150 House seats and all 31 state Senate seats. I was so underprepared. And there were already two people running. One of them was double my age and was the mayor of the wealthiest city in North Texas. And the other one was the most prominent Fort Worth City Council member who had been in office for 2 decades. And I'm like, there's no way I can run. And these are like $1 million races. And I'm a pastor. A youth pastor at that. We're not known for making tons of money. And so literally my wife, we pray about it and we're like, okay, Lord, what do you want to do with us? Like, do you want us to run? And I clearly heard a yes from the Lord. Like, it was just one of those moments where it's like, run. I don't think I ever believed I was going to win. My wife will claim she knew it the whole time, and she has much more faith than me, which is why I married this incredible woman. But I had no faith. I really thought, Lord, if it's just about making noise and speaking out from my generation to be a voice for righteousness, a voice for conservative values, a voice for those who are not going to speak out for themselves, to get woke indoctrination out of our public school system through the state, to cut down on government spending, to make sure that religious freedom is held to the highest standard in the state of Texas, to give school choice back to kids so that we could let our tax dollars follow the student, not the system and the woke education bureaucrats. I was like, let's just go for it. So awesome. I ran a absolutely, like, I would say, scorched earth on the left campaign, not scorched earth against my opponent. I just went scorched earth against the agenda against our kids. And we ran for, 11-month race. And I ended up, I was polling at first in third place at 1%, which if you're watching at home, if you're polling at 1%, that means there's 99% you don't have. And so I'm like, there's no way I can win. And we took that from polling at 1% to winning by the largest margin of any state rep seat in the runoff that next year. And
that's incredible.
It's just been wild. Incredible. That was a very long answer, but that's how I got started.
Yeah. Well, I wanted you to finish because I wanted you to get that thought out. If I could interject on one point, hearing the voice of God, if you're a young person and you're trying to decipher what the will of God is for your life, what was it like for you to hear that voice clearly in your situation?
So I always say there's 3 questions to ask yourself before you decide to run for office. And these were the 3 questions that I asked myself. Number 1, I asked my spiritual oversight to pray with me about it. So I went to my pastor and I was like, hey, look, I don't want to make this decision without someone who has also prayed with me, who I trust spiritually, because the reality is you need a third party who's not running for office is cool. Like, I mean, it's like, I feel like until 20 years ago, it wasn't like, it was just kind of like, oh, those are just, old white gray haired people in suits, and like, who cares? Now it's like, you got people like Charlie Kirk. You got people that have just changed the game for the next generation, and are like, no, we're taking back our country. You've got Donald Trump, who has invigorated a nation. You got RFK making America healthy again. So there's a little bit of a luster to it that has never been there. And so for me, I did not want to run because I thought it was trendy. I didn't want to run because it was like, oh, this. So I went to my pastor. I said, would you seriously pray about whether I'm supposed to do this? And here's the key, Christian. I said,
your pastors are the Schatz, right?
Yes. Landon and Heather Schott. They're amazing. Mercy Culture. And I said, would you pray? And if you don't feel like it's my time to run, I'm submitted to what the Lord tells you. So like I said that to them. And so they took it so seriously. And you got to find a pastor, by the way, that actually celebrates the calling of government and doesn't tolerate it. And so, and he goes, absolutely, we'll pray. They take it to the whole board of elders. I'm on staff at this church. And they said, we're going to seriously pray. They took a whole weekend, prayed about it to hear from the Lord. They then came back to me. And they said, Nate, what if I told you that we don't feel like it's like the season for you to run? And I said, I'm submitted. I go, I want to hear from the Lord. And I know that the Bible is very clear that there's wisdom and wise counsel. And I trust you guys. I attend this church. I'm on staff at this church. I won't run. And they go, awesome. We wanted to see if you had a submitted heart. We don't feel that way. We feel like you are supposed to run, and we're ready to get behind you fully. And I was like, oh, thanks for the trick question. You
passed the test.
So the first question was, have I brought spiritual oversight in to answer my call? The second question is, if you're married, this is your spouse. If you're not married, this is your family. And bringing them in. And it's this question. It's not, can I run? It's, will you run with me? And I had to ask my wife in the midst of a season where we had just, fled California and started a new life with our kids. Are you ready for me to upheaval every bit of our life and start over? And are you willing to jump in with me? And of course, for my wife, it was unapologetically, let's go to war. She's hardcore, like, yes, we're in.
That's awesome.
But it's, if you can't be split on it. Whoever you're in total relationship with, your spouse, and then your kids. I've got kids. They're like so little at this point, and I literally brought them in the living room and I explained what my schedule was going to be, and I explained we're going to save babies, we're going to help kids. Will you run with me? Will you be a part of this? My kids are like, let's go. And my kids can tell you the GOP platform right now. So
that's awesome.
So then that's the second one, and the third one is the hardest one. The hardest question you ask yourself is, if I lose, can I still glorify God in the process?
Yeah.
And I really believe if you can't lose and still celebrate what the Lord has done, you're not ready to run. So
that's an incredible answer, and such godly and wise perspective. Well, Nate, I mean, there's a lot going on in the Texas House. You've seen it for 3 years. You were on the forefront when all the Ken Paxton impeachers and all the anti-school choicers were running for re-election, and you and 3 others were fighting the good fight to put the right people in office, alongside Attorney General Ken Paxton and Governor Greg Abbott. So now we're at a different phase where we have a rogue speaker who's worked with the Democrats, and there were 31 Republicans who worked with him, but mostly Democrats that elected him. And this is the first time this has really come to a head. Since 2009, it's been going this way, really, where they've been working with mostly Democrats to get the votes. But this time, so many of the Republican caucus were against this. And that's in part because there's new reformers in the Texas House that are willing to take a stand. And a lot of the others that had been there had come alongside them. And so you have, I guess, over 55 votes that were wanting the speaker to be Cook, and unfortunately, the rest voted for Burrows. And talk about this. Talk about what this has meant and why the Speaker of the House is important. What does this mean in terms of getting the RPT platform agenda passed? What does this mean in terms of running out the clock, as you've described it? There's Project Run Out the Clock, and Talk about the deals that were made to get to this point with banning Democrat chairs and what all this means.
Yeah. So incredible question. It's loaded. So it might take me a minute to talk about it, but here's the sad thing, Christian, is like, even the things that you just talked about, it's so hard for the average voter to even know that all this is going on. In fact, when I moved to Texas, my assumption, probably same to yours, having grown up in Texas and like experienced, like Texas is known to the rest of the world as like the bastion of freedom, like the cowboys, those that are going to stand in the gap and lead the way on conservative policy. And then, to much of my surprise, getting into the Texas House, on day one of my first session, the first vote you take is who you're voting for speaker. And so I have this guy, Dade Phelan, at the time, who, by the way, spent all this money against me in my primary, never called me, never talked to me after he literally used money to tear down my reputation in my own district, who is a Republican and won't even claim.
What did they spend against you?
So I can only tell you what his groups spent against me, but his group spent a combined effort of almost $300,000 against me. And so and by the way, like when I got in, I was like, hey, I'm cool to bury the hatchet. I've been in ministry. I have thick skin. I know what it's like to be a pastor. Like, this is cool. Let's get together and talk about policies. Not only would the speaker not meet with me, the speaker refused to commit to passing one of our 8 Texas GOP priorities. And he's a Republican. And so I reached out to his chief of staff because, get this, as a member of the Texas House, I didn't even have his personal cell phone number. And so I still don't need it though. And so I literally reached out to his chief of staff and I said, can I meet with him in order for, and this was the verbiage I used, which is what made everyone mad. I said, can I meet with the speaker so he can earn my vote for speaker? Now, it's an unsaid rule. You just vote for the speaker. Otherwise, all your bills get killed. The problem is I had a patriot friend, Tony Tinderholt, who's running. And so Tony's running for speaker. He couldn't get any support because everyone's scared of Dade. And so on day one, am sitting on the House floor. Now, remember, my wife's a patriot. Honestly, there are times where I think she's just going to take over and run against me in my own house if I take one bad vote. But she's sitting next to me on the House floor as I'm getting sworn in. And Tony walks up to me and he goes, man, we're not going to have many people vote for me. He said, everyone's going to vote for Dade because they're scared of him. I go, he's liberal. And he goes, I know. He goes, but the only way, this is day one, have not been sworn in, don't know how to push the buttons yet. He goes, there's only one way for me to run. I have to have a seconding speech. I'm on the House floor and I don't even know how to work my buttons on my desk. And I go, you want me to give a speech to you? For you? And he goes, yeah. And I go, I don't even know what we do here. I was like, I just got here. And he goes, if you don't give a speech, there will be no opportunity for a conservative to run for speaker. And he walked away. And I was like, there's no way I can do this. I looked at my wife and she looked at me. And I literally felt this prompting from the Lord as I looked at my kids sitting on the floor with me of, Nate, you can show your kids right now what a coward looks like, or you can show them what courage looks like for the first time. And I looked at my wife and I go, I think I'm going to give a speech. And she goes, I assure you, I thought you would. And I go, okay, got it. What is the big deal? So I got up on the fly. My first action as a Texas House member was to vote with 3 members against Dade Phelan out of 150 and give a seconding speech for the nomination of Tony Tinderholt. Well, that set us on a trajectory for 4 of us. We grew by 1. For 4 of us to take a stand all throughout session and really hold the line. In the process of that, what you're talking about, the Ken Paxton impeachment, good Lord, we literally impeached the greatest attorney general that I've ever met in my entire life, greatest attorney general Texas ever had. And in the process of that, we're standing up and fighting. We're doing all this kind of stuff. So fast forward, we get into this last interim after the session ends. We pass very little of the Republican priorities. We had to fight for even property tax relief. We had to go to war, even to get a lot of vaccine mandates banned. We had to literally go up and offer amendments just for our 87 at the time led Republican body to do anything. So the interim comes and I get in touch with Attorney General Ken Paxton, Governor Greg Abbott, and we go to work. Throughout the interim, we helped flip about 21 seats across the state of Texas. So now we have this conservative coalition. Now, leadership ends up, others will follow if people will lead. And I think as our group grew from 4 to 25, everyone realized, this trajectory is pretty strong. We need to get on board. And so we began to gather as a group, growing all the way up to around 55, as you say, who now we go into a caucus meeting where our speaker is supposed to be chosen. We had chosen through a straw poll who we wanted to represent us, who we thought was going to be fair. And hear me, it wasn't about having the most conservative speaker. It was about having the most fair speaker that was going to give a voice to the conservative movement, was going to allow the Texas GOP to actually pass our conservative legislation. And so we got behind David Cook, who's a friend of mine. He lives in Tarrant County. And we got 55 votes in there, which means, get this, that means he wins the caucus straw poll. So now we go into the caucus, and Dustin Burrows, as you said, gets up, makes a 2-minute speech, not trying to win any of our votes. The moment he sees that David Cook's about to win, he gets up with 31 members, as you said, walks to the other side of the building, makes an unholy deal with the Democrats, meaning this: we still don't know what that deal is, but we found some of it out. One of them is, maybe it has to do with gambling. Maybe it has to do with, we're going to make sure that you guys maintain power. So fast forward to day one on the House floor. We hold strong at 55. Speaker Burrows wins. And then after he wins, he then proceeds to say, I want to work with every member. So we're like, well, maybe this is good. We have all these amendments that were based off of our contract with Texas. And this contract with Texas had 12 bullet points of how we're going to reform the Texas House. So, Christian, just to educate everyone watching, like right now, we have an Obama White House lawyer as our parliamentarian who calls all strikes. Insane. Hugh Brady. Right now, we have calendars committee where all conservative legislation goes to die that is not subject to the open meetings rules where they have to record and live stream. So any conservative bill can be killed in secret and no one knows who did it. Right now, we have a rule that says, hey, we're just not going to pass anything for the first 60 days so that we can push the clock and run out of time on our Texas GOP priorities. Right now, we had Democrat committee chairs. So like all of a sudden, we have all these amendments and it goes in the rules package. We're going to reform the Texas House. We have all these votes. We're about to just shove it down their throat. Yes, we're bringing transparency to the House for the first time. We get to the House floor. And as we get to the House floor, this man who said, I want to work with all members, as we're about to offer these amendments, he has one of his lieutenants, which is Jared Patterson, get up and call the previous question. That means all debate is shut down. No reform will pass. So I immediately tweeted, and you can watch, it's within 1 minute of this happening, I tweeted war. Because I'm like, it's on. Because you just killed every conservative reform we ever could. And they proceeded to pass a bill that says it bans Democrat chairs. However, we call it the Democrat Empowerment Act of 2025 because what it does is it actually makes sure in law that only Democrats can hold vice chair positions. And even though we're giving our Republican chairmanships to our chairmanships to the Republicans, the vice chairs are now elevated to a co-chair position. And we're increasing their budget by $5,000 a month of taxpayer money while we decrease Republican chair budgets to make up for it. So hear me on this. Why is that important? Because if we elevate them to a co-chair, they can now compel testimony and they can stall any bill in committee process. They can bring up any liberal bill they want, and the chair is forced to have to hear it in committee. They could legalize abortion in Texas with none of us being able to stop it right now in a chair, in a committee. Now on the floor, we'll try to kill it, but in a committee, they have that power and they're taking money for it. So all that happens, and we are shouting from the rooftops, this is the Democrat Empowerment Act of 2025. But leadership had just indoctrinated these people that said, hey, we're banning Dem chairs. We're banning Dem chairs. And this is the problem in Texas and what you should be infuriated about. Right now, we have a leadership team that has sold out their voters, and they have formed an unholy alliance with the Democrats. And because our speaker won his speakership with the Democrats, he now owes the Democrats. And he's
obligated to
the Democrats, which is why you can guarantee that any Texas GOP policy that comes to the floor is going to be already watered down in order to match what the Democrats wanted. And it is going to be incumbent upon us and the fighters that are in the chamber to amend and kill any bill that advances a stifling of liberty and any bill that grows government. And so we are in for the fight of our life. I know that was a really long explanation, but it is insane. People don't know this. And so what you'll hear from our speaker is, we're ready to pass conservative legislation. But then they will file a bill from the leadership team that claims to ban DEI in universities. And in the bill, it actually codifies that you can teach DEI as long as it's in the right area of the university. And this is what it is. They think here, and there's three things. Number one, the current leadership team thinks that the grassroots are stupid. Number two, they are going to always tell you they did something conservative. And number three, they are always going to be projecting conservatism while codifying liberalism in the bill. And so we kind of took it upon ourselves, me, Brian Harrison, Andy Hopper, Mitch Little, Shelley Luther, Mike Alcott, Steve Toth, Tony Tinderholt. I'm missing a bunch, but like we, David Lowe, we took it upon ourselves of like this session. Not only is it our goal to pass every conservative bill that we want to get across the finish line, it's actually our bill to expose the darkness of this chamber so that Texans can clean house next primary season. And so I know that's a mouthful, but man, it's so much.
Well, it's powerful. I mean, and to recap, I mean, Democrats are empowered under this sleight of hand where it looks like that they banned Democrat chairs, where Republicans banned Democrat chairs, when in fact they empowered them and gave them all the vice chairmanships. They can chub in these committees, which is basically like a filibuster. They can just talk and talk and talk until nothing gets done. And they've got $5,000 per month to go to their staff, or their supplies, whatever they need to do to advance the Democrat agenda.
Just so everyone knows why that's such a problem. So by giving them the $5,000 raise, they lowered the budget for Republican chairs. But here's the issue with that. Democrats now have the power to go find the smartest and most high qualified lawyers and attorneys in the city of Austin that graduated with some woke degree, but are very understanding of the legislation. And they can go hire them with your tax dollars to come in and find points of order and to find issues with every conservative bill, quite literally giving us a disadvantage in the process when we have a Republican majority in the Texas House. It is insane. It's insane.
It's ridiculous. And so hopefully Republicans will be held accountable for this. The ones that did this, I mean, really, they're what's called bureaucrats. They're beholden to the Democrats, so they're not very Republican at all. But hopefully the leadership that's done this will be held accountable. It's interesting to see what will happen this upcoming primary season. What do you think needs to change within the Texas House to ensure that we have conservative leadership? So, I mean, is it just a matter of getting 5-10 new people elected? I mean, what will it take?
So here's the reality. Last session, there were four of us, and us four realized very quickly the only way to bring out the rot in the Texas House is to shine a light on it. Sunlight's the greatest disinfectant. And so we just decided we were going to be unapologetically loud, unapologetically bold, not worry about hurting people's feelings, and make sure that the truth gets out to Texans. And it's really not personal for us. It's very much, let me rephrase that. It's personal to our constituents. So it can't be personal to our colleagues. So it's just one of those things where it's like my loyalties lie with the future generations of Texas. It does not lie with the relationships within this chamber. I don't remember which congressman said it, but I loved it. He said, my loyalty to another member of Congress will never outweigh my loyalty to God, my family, and the people who sent me here. And that has to be the spirit in which we carry. And so ultimately, it's not just about winning races. It's about owning the narrative today. So every single day is an opportunity for us to win the narrative. When we go out there right now, we're going on 6. That's right. 6 of our first month and a half of session. We have taken 6 long weekends. 5 of those weekends happened before one bill was sent and referred. 5 of those weekends happened before committees were even formed for us to do the work, which is what we call Project Run Out the Clock. Last session, I had a bill that was going to make adoption free in the state of Texas, where churches could literally sponsor a family. We would match them with a grant program. A child would be rescued from the corrupt and horrific foster care system, we would save millions of taxpayer dollars to pay for that child's life because a family is now taking them on. And that bill died on the House floor because we, quote, ran out of time. Last session, we had a bill putting the 10 commandments in every classroom. Guess what? We ran out of time. Last session, we had a bill for detransitioners that wanted to be restored to their originally God-given body to help them get back to the way God created them after they took harmful gender mutilation, hormone treatment therapies, as well as surgeries. That bill died because we ran out of time. This delay tactic we're seeing is so that our priority legislation runs out of time. That's what we call run out the clock. And so looking at it, it's going to take people like a Brian Harrison. It's going to take people like us that are willing to put on camera, in recording, here's what's happening, here's the truth. Because here's the thing. What we saw was for the first time, we started speaking out this session really loud about long weekends. And as we spoke out, the number of people who voted against long weekends grew because the pressure was on. I mean, it was just like people were blowing up in their district. The second thing is the RPT passed something where if you are a censured candidate by the Republican Party, then the RPT says you can't run as a Republican in the next primary. Now, I don't want to say that this is going to be this like magical solution to kick people off the ballot because it's never been done. I have no clue. But what I will say is if you're watching and you have a rep who's taking long weekends, operating with the current leadership team, betraying the voters, you should get involved in your local party and you should be actively trying to censure these members from the Republican Party who are betraying their voters because they don't carry our values. And so there's a few things. We've got to take the truth to every single corner of this session. Second thing is we need to be raising up people to run against the people who are working in very close proximity with this leadership team because we need patriots in the room. Already the energy has shifted. And I'll tell you how. So last session, the Republican caucus censured me. Okay, censored me, Steve Toth, Brian Harrison, and Tony Tinderholt, which is a slap on the wrist and says, can't believe you went against Republicans in the primary. That's bad. We don't approve of your actions, and you are absolutely not a part of this team anymore. This session, after primaries, I was just voted in as one of the leaders for North Texas to make sure I approve of all the policies for the GOP caucus. So
you are totally vindicated, my friend.
Yeah, and so is Steve Toth, by the way. We're both in it. And so the reason I bring that up is it's shifting. The grassroots is working. These moves are actually making a difference. We now have people in leadership that are talking about passing a ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying because they're literally begging, what do we have to do to get y'all to shut up? And I'm like, be a conservative. Just be a conservative, and we will. So we have to tell the truth. We have to amplify the truth, and we need to raise up candidates to run against these guys.
So good. So good. Well, you gave a lot of good information there, and there's so many things that you can work on different fronts, staying connected to your local party. And if your elected member deserves censorship, that's what they're going to get. They can run for office themselves.
One more thing is, look, if you want to get heavily engaged, when I went to Texas Youth Summit, I looked around and it was one of the coolest things in the world. For the first time, I saw an actual like youth movement in Texas that had vendors outside that literally gave absolutely every option of how you can get engaged in the legislative fight, whether it be Texans for Vaccine Choice, whether it be pro-life causes, Texans for Strong Borders, whatever it is. For Liberty and Justice, which is what we do, where we mobilize churches and starting a chapter in local church, Turning Point USA. Like, if you have not signed up for Texas Youth Summit, that's insane. Like, go sign up so that you can get connected to what you're passionate about. So
that's awesome. Well, thanks for that plug there, and look forward to coordinating together this upcoming year with Liberty and Justice. So a couple of the bills, I just want to kind of close on this. There's a couple of things you're working on, and school choice is something I've seen you talk in length about. There's priorities of the governor that are emergency items. Teacher pay raise is one of them. Property tax relief. Frankly, property taxes should be totally abolished. And Ron DeSantis is working on that in Florida. We could do that here in Texas, and I've seen you and your colleague Brian Harrison talk about this. What does it take to get the conservative agenda passed, and what bills do you expect to actually get passed this session?
So it's all up for grabs, but what I do know is that school choice is going to pass this session 100% without a doubt. And, just to hit on school choice before we talk on any other priorities, I've been a staunch school choice supporter from day one. Worked in public schools, worked in private schools, was a college professor at one point. And I recognize very quickly that if we do not get woke indoctrination out of schools, we are going to be in big trouble for the future of Texas. And so, the arguments that I've had for school choice have been really clear. School choice is about empowering parents, not taking rights away. And so one thing for any listener that's watching right now, because there's two factions that are struggling with the school choice debate right now. There's the left who sees it as competition for their woke indoctrination machine, and they hate it. And to that, I'm like, forget y'all, we're doing this. But then there is an actual conservative concern that people don't want their rights as homeschool and private school families to be taken away. And I actually love addressing that because I think that's super important. In this bill, not only does the House Bill 3 have a removal of testing for homeschool families, but it actually does two things that are really important to talk about. And the first one is it actually codifies into law that the government cannot ever take away religious liberty and freedom within private and homeschool, cannot ever manage your hiring and firing practices at your private school, cannot ever mess with your behavioral standards at your private school, cannot ever tell you what curriculum you must use to educate the child, and will not impede on your rights in any way. That's codified into law inside of HB 3. The second thing is that what people need to understand is we are not saying you homeschoolers and traditional private school families are now ESA families. We're creating a new system for people who are in failed schools that says, hey, you become an ESA recipient, and now you get to take that money that you were spending in the public education system anywhere else, anywhere that actually serves your needs, and we're removing the strings from that. And if you want to stay a traditional homeschool and private school family that doesn't take an ESA, you have that right as well, and this doesn't affect you at all. And so that's why I'm a freedom guy. I think this is incredibly important. We announced yesterday, I was at the governor's mansion with Governor Abbott when we announced that we have 76 co-authors on our school choice bill, which means it will pass. We have the votes already, and that I expect that's going to pass in the next couple of weeks. The other things that we have to do right now, communist China can purchase Texas land. And so I believe that we have the votes to ban China and other foreign enemies from owning Texas land, not just farmland, by the way, any land. I don't want them to be able to own air in the state of Texas. Like whatever it takes, we got to ban it. The other thing, we've got to truly crack down on the fact that we have sexual indoctrination going on in the classroom right now. And so last session, a bill passed and then it was challenged in the court and was overthrown. And so we've got to go back and make sure that we can truly clean up what's going on in the classroom. Beyond that, border security is always big. We're going to work on that. Water infrastructure is huge for Texas. Conservatives should care about water, and they should care about making sure that our communities are taken care of. Housing affordability for the next generation. I want my kids and your kids to be able to afford buying a home the way that we bought one as millennials. And we got in the market quick. And so now it's like, how do we effectively, without messing up the free market, make housing affordability a possibility? I think we're going to attack that pretty strong this session. The second thing, though, on the idea of taxes is property tax reform. So I'm just going to throw this out here. It is not a popular thing to say in this building, but the number being thrown around right now is between $6 and $10 billion in property tax relief. I'm going to tell you something. We have a $24 billion surplus. It is insulting that we would only spend $6 to $10 billion giving money back to the taxpayer. Because I just want to remind everyone in this space that when we say we have a surplus, that doesn't mean, oh, look, the legislature produced money. It means we overtaxed you. It means we robbed you. We stole from you. And by the way, we're asking you to thank us for giving back 20% of it, 30% of it. Heck no. Me and Brian Harrison are very aligned on this. All $24 billion should be coming back to the taxpayer to buy down M&O and compression so that we can eventually eliminate property taxes. So I'm just going to be frank with you. I do not think this session we give $24 billion in property tax relief, but you have my commitment. I will fight tooth and nail to make it the most maximum effort to put us on a path to eliminating property taxes. But that's going to be the fight. I mean, it's going to be big. So,
well, Nate, that's such good vision for the future. Hopefully all of those things get past this session, but it's the groundwork for maybe what can happen next session, along with banning taxpayer funded lobbying. So we've got a lot of work to do as grassroots to support great state reps like you and ensure that we have a future that's what we've known in Texas, and we don't turn out from the place you came from, turn out being like California. We've got to fight for Texas. As Texas goes, so goes the nation. So Nate, thank you so much for all your insights. And man, I really appreciate you. Anything closing just for someone maybe wanting to make a difference? It could be someone of any age, but of course, working with young people.
Yeah. At the end of the day, like the people that helped get me elected were not 90. They were people with energy that were ready to roll. And I love everyone in the process, our elderly that have written checks for my campaign, that have supported me and shown up. It's amazing. We need patriots of all ages. But when I look at this generation, a lot of people like to talk down about Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I see it as the most hope-filled generation I have ever seen. My kids are Gen Alpha. And I'm like, this generation is going to change the world, because for the first time, there's 3 distinctions about them that makes them really special that they need to hold on to. Number one, this is the first generation that is not affected by mainstream media. It is not on. And a lot of people think that's bad because it's social media. I think it's huge, because this generation has an opportunity at the age of 12, 13, and 14 to build a bigger platform than Fox News at your fingertips. Now, I'm not advocating for social media usage at a young age, but with a parent's oversight, speaking out on issues and learning that we love our country, we love conservative values, and we love traditional marriage is just huge. And those are things that the next generation can do. I would also say, when it comes to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, this generation, statistically speaking, has a greater hunger for absolute truth than yours and I's millennial generation does, that we're all about the gray and the nuance. The absolute truth element is beautiful, because for the first time, we have young people that are standing up and saying, hey, it's actually not nuance. There's a man and there's a woman. Hey, it's actually not nuance. My future is going to be better if I have a traditional family. Hey, it's actually not nuance. These conservative values lead to a healthier society. Hey, it's not nuance. Transsexuality is a mental illness. This is not a preference. So it's like we have a generation that has a hunger for absolute truth. Lean into it. And the third thing that is super special about Gen Z, Gen Z young men are coming to church and going into Christianity at a higher rate than any generation in modern history. Wow. And so we're seeing this boost of young men that want Jesus. Here's what's so great about that. If you go to a godly church, we believe that as young men, you're not called to be beta males. And I think these young men are watching our generation and they're like, why are these guys so weak? Why aren't they standing up and fighting? Where's the boldness? Gen Z is ready to fight, and they're ready to stand up, take back what manhood is, and say, this generation is going to be the generation that takes a stand for the most vulnerable, for our conservative values. And man, I'm just so filled with hope. So for all Gen Z, for all Gen Alpha watching out there, I just want to say, do not hold down your voice for anyone. I'll end it with this because I think it's important. When I walked into leadership's office at the beginning of session, I was offered a seat at the table. And I sat down and they said, I believe that you are supposed to be with a seat at the table. You're smart. We like you. But they said, if you want a seat at this table, you have to do one thing. And I laughed and I go, what's that? And they said, you have to be quiet. And I sat there for a second and I looked at him and he said, look, you can be on the outside in the opposition, or you can have a seat at the table and you can be on the team. You decide.
You don't want a seat at the table. You want the whole table.
And I looked at him and I said, I am just going to tell you, I've always been more of an outside in the opposition type of guy, and I don't plan on changing, and I'm not being quiet for anybody. I want to encourage every single Gen Z and Gen Alpha student watching right now. The greatest thing you have is your voice and your commitment to the truth. And when anyone tries to silence you, that is not just a challenge from the enemy. That's a mandate from the Lord for you to use your voice to speak up where others don't carry the courage to do so. And so, man, get loud and get bold. So
good, Nate. So good. Well, it's encouraging to hear your story, and what everything is happening is just abysmal. I mean, it's just terrible to see what's going on in the Texas House, but we're encouraged by some legislation that'll probably get through, but there's so much more that needs to get through. And we know that they're running up the clock, but we have great leaders like you in our state that are fighting back and fighting the good fight every day. So you need more people amongst your ranks, and we'll be praying for that. We'll be praying for you and your family. And thank you so much for hopping on today.
I appreciate you, man. I'm so grateful for you. I'm grateful for this podcast, for Texas Youth Summit, for all that you're doing. And I can't wait to hang out next. It's going to be awesome.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.